Welcome everybody to lecture 6. Now we will try to obtain the Lorentz transformation formulas from some elementary or basic considerations. Most of the algebra that is required in the next few pages in section 6, starting page 29, most of the algebra is very elementary and I think self-explanatory, and by reading the steps and the further justifications you can get them. What I want to emphasize instead is that here to start with we are not using the consideration where light moves with the same velocity c in every inertial frame. That is not the consideration. Instead, we start from some very elementary ideas about velocity addition. Namely, if one frame is moving with respect to a second frame with velocity v, which is uniform velocity, and the second frame is moving with respect to still another frame, a third frame with another uniform velocity, the first frame is moving with respect to the third frame also with uniform velocity. In other words, if you have studied group theory, there is a group property of velocity addition, and this is a manifestation of the closure property of velocity addition, together with other things like for every velocity addition, there is an inverse addition and so on. So this is what we'll start with, and which appears prima facie to be a rather reasonable assumption to make. With this, we consider again two frames S and S prime, where for a change, frame S prime is moving, from S is moving with respect to S prime. Note the difference on top of page 29. Frame S is moving with respect to frame S prime with velocity v in the positive x direction. And the clocks are turned on in both frames when their origins coincide. This is a slightly different convention. So x and t are x and t coordinates. That's a time value which we do not consider necessarily having the same flow in both frames. X and t are the position and time in frame S, and x prime and t prime in frame S prime. We are also assuming that the y and z coordinates are unaffected by the transformation when the boost movement of one frame with respect to another is taking place in the x direction. This is partly because of the fact that this is an extrapolation of Galilean transformation and no such change takes place in the Galilean case. So we use this as a simplified assumption. The other thing is that if y and z coordinates were also changing, it wouldn't be so easy to consistently explain Michelson-Morley experiment and its negative result. Also, we postulate that the transformation relating x and t to x prime and t prime being in general the different time flow in frame S prime, this relationship between these two sets is linear relationship. One of the reasons is that for one x and t, one expects a unique x prime and t prime, something which is not ensured if the relationship is non-linear. But common sense tells us that that must be the case. And secondly, x prime equal to x plus vt, which is the Galilean transformation, that should be recovered in a limiting case from the formula we are going to derive. For that also it is very convenient, not only convenient, it is a guiding principle that the formula will derive better be a linear one. Having assumed all this and making this postulate that frame S is moving with respect to x prime in the positive x direction, let us write some linear relationships connecting x prime, t prime with x and t as given in equation 69 in page 6. The four parameters alpha 1, beta 1, alpha, gamma 1 and delta 1 are quite naturally functions of V, as we have seen in the Galilean case as well. Now goes a little bit of algebra, starting from equation 71 and so on, moving on to page 30, just basically differentiating the coordinates. You discovered that when the relative velocity is V, then beta 1 is delta 1 times V and alpha 1 is equal to delta 1. This is very elementary algebra which I ask you to follow, leading to a more simplified version of the originally assumed linear relationships as in equation 76, where basically you have two parameters left, alpha 1 and gamma 1. Stopping here for the time being at equation 76, consider three frames now, S, S prime, S double prime. So with respect to S double prime, S prime is moving with velocity v2 in the x direction, and with respect to S prime, S is moving with velocity v1 again in the x direction, uniform velocities of this. So similar relations as we have started with are written in 77 and 78, these two equations, connecting the prime coordinates with the unprime coordinates and double prime coordinates with the single prime coordinates, and alpha 1, gamma 1, alpha 2, gamma 2 in extrapolation of 76 are all functions of the relative velocities in each case. That's what we learned in the Galilean case, and we're using that. Now goes a little bit of algebra, which no point explaining, keeping the relationship that alpha and delta are related and so on. You obtain equation 80 connecting the double prime coordinates, equation 79 and 80 more precisely, connecting the double prime coordinates with the unprime coordinates. This is just algebra, substituting things. But then these are also relationships which are linear, and now we use the group property, namely when you go directly from S to S double prime, or rather S double prime to S, then we expect that the same kinds of alpha, beta, gamma, delta relations will be valid, and the new alpha will be equal to the new delta. So in 79, the alpha type thing is alpha 2 times alpha 1 plus V2 times gamma 1. And the delta type thing is from equation 80, gamma 2 alpha 1 V1 plus alpha 1 V alpha 2. So these two must be equal if you believe equation 75 derived earlier. The alpha factor and delta factor same. Now simply from this, with a couple of steps, you find that alpha 1 V1 over gamma 1 is same as alpha 2 V2 over gamma 2. Now for each boost with velocities V1 and V2, then alpha V over gamma is a constant quantity. And this, if you notice, has the dimension of velocity square. This I leave to you as an exercise to verify, which is essential at this stage. So this we call k squared, where k is of the dimension of velocity, alpha times V over gamma. If you proceed like this, then k squared will become, or rather k will become, a deciding factor out in our transformation equations. Now, if you notice equation 84, you can see that using the last relationship, only alpha remains to be undefined, it remains to be determined. X prime and t prime are expressed in terms of x and t with alpha and k there. First of all, before we go on to determine alpha, let us remember that k is expressed in terms of alpha, v and gamma corresponding to each transformation. What does it mean? This is a quantity of the dimension of velocity, namely k, which is invariant in all frames. Because if in the first transformation you get a certain value of k, and in the second transformation something else, then k square won't be the same. So velocity, it is a velocity which is invariant in all frames. What it can be is something we'll come to later. But before that, let us come to equation 85. If x prime is expressed as alpha of v times x plus vt, then when you try to write the inverse thing, namely x in terms of x prime, it must be alpha of minus v, nothing else. That is because this is a relative velocity in one direction versus relative velocity in the other direction. But space, free space, does not distinguish between different directions. This is called isotropy assumption of space, which is universally done in all studies related to space-time. We are considering free space where there is no potential or anything. So therefore, alpha of v and alpha of minus v in equation 85 are construed as the same because it depends on the magnitude. If the relative velocity is one direction with respect to another in another case, then these two relative velocities do not define some specially chosen directions of space. So when the magnitude is given, the corresponding alpha factor should be the same. And if you assume that, then you obtain equation 86 with a little bit of algebra from 83 and 84. Now, you substitute what you get in 86 in equation 85 in the expression for x in terms of x. Yeah, I think there is a typographic error. X equals, there's a typo here. Yeah, x equal alpha minus v times x prime plus vt prime is what it should be. But when you do that, finally, what you realize is that, so please correct the typo in the expression for x in terms of alpha minus v in equation 85. It should be x equal to alpha of minus v times x prime plus vt prime. Once you write that, you obtain equation 87 because alpha minus v is there and x plus vt is written as actually x prime plus vt prime is written in terms of 1 over alpha v from equation 69. Remember, alpha of v is 1 for v equal to 0, right? There is no transformation in that case, no velocity. And alpha of v is a sort of scale factor that again should not depend on whether it is in one direction or the other direction. So in this case, alpha of minus v and alpha of v have no business to be different. Therefore, if you use equation 87, you get alpha of v equal to alpha of minus v, and each is equal to 1 over square root of 1 minus v squared over k squared. Now, if you write everything out, of course, correcting the printing mistake or typographic error in the second equation in 85, then you are good enough to calculate and find out x and x prime, x and t expressed in terms of x prime and t prime. The second set of equations in page 33. If these are the equations, x equal to x prime minus vt prime, etc., then you go back to our old notation where s prime is moving with respect to s with velocity v. Then what do you get? You get x prime equal to x minus vt over square root of 1 minus v squared by k squared and so on. The set of equations written in 89. Now you remember, k again is a quantity with a dimension of velocity which remains the same in frame S and also in frame S prime. Now forget about S double prime. Then what kind of a quantity of the dimension of velocity you can identify which remains same in two frames moving with respect to one another? In Newtonian mechanics, in Galilean transformation, can you think of any quantity with the dimension of velocity which remains the same in two frames which are moving with the uniform speed with respect to one another? The only such quantity is infinite velocity. Infinite velocity is infinite in frame S and infinite in frame S prime as well. So in Galilean transformation or in the Newtonian system, the only possible value of k is infinite velocity. Put k equal to infinity in equation 89 and what do you get? You get back Galilean transformation. Now the picture was changed when we saw the negative result of the Michelson-Morley experiment. That told us painfully and shocked us with the revelation that velocity of light in vacuum or free space is same in two frames which are moving with respect to each other with uniform velocity. So now get, well before we reach infinity, a value of k, namely k equal to c. And that will also ensure in retaining the invariance of Maxwell's equations in moving from S to S prime, as we have seen before, because then k becomes c and we get the same Lorentz transformation formula as what were written in an ad hoc fashion in an earlier lecture in order to keep the invariance of Maxwell's equations in two inertial frames. So what are we learning? We are learning that Lorentz transformation gives Galilean transformation in the limiting condition. The velocity is very small compared to c, where v over c, or more precisely v square over c square, can be neglected. But other than that, you have a more general set of transformation equations where c automatically emerges as invariant in two frames moving with respect to each other, and this c enters Maxwell's equation. So Maxwell's equation also retains the same quantity of the dimension of velocity, c squared equal to 1 over mu naught epsilon naught, as an invariant quantity. Thus we obtain Lorentz transformation formulas not only using the invariance of c in frames, but also using some very elementary consideration of velocity addition formulas. Two corollaries to point out before we end. The first of which is v cannot exceed c, because otherwise space-time coordinates in the transform frame cease to be real, they become imaginary if v exceeds c, because there is a square root of a minus sign involved. And secondly, time is really shown to flow with different rates in different frames. We end the discussion in this note, and we will continue to investigate various consequences of such transformation in the lectures to come. Thank you very much.